An unscheduled panel. So if you're here for the Christopher Morris panel, this is, so you want to be a plone consultant, just so you know you're in the right place. Everyone here for that? Okay. So I want to thank everyone for coming and thank our panelists here who you'll meet in just a moment. But first I just want to take a quick poll. How many people here have plone consulting businesses already? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people are thinking about starting a plone consulting business? Okay, so you're in the right place. So,
how many are here for some other reason?
Okay.
How many people here contract plone consulting services? One. Okay, he's the guy we've got to get afterwards. Yeah.
Well, who contracts plone consultants?
Hires plone.
Hires
Who
people.
hires us?
Yeah.
Get them.
They're not here. They don't want to be here. Okay.
That's what we want.
So we've done this panel at the last two conferences, at the Seattle conference and the Naples conference, and had some really good discussions. So I'm hoping that you guys are all fired up with questions. I want to do this not so much as a presentation as much as a dialogue. So really, these guys are up here to answer your questions. They've been doing plone consulting for a long time, and this is your chance to, find out what works and what doesn't. So just to kind of frame things, well, first I'm going to do introductions. So my name is Nate Ani. I'm working at Jazzcarta in Boston. We've been doing plone consulting since 2004. And Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, let's see. I'm Gary Beckholt. I'm managing director at Jarn, Norwegian and European plone consultancy. We're 5 years old pretty much exactly now, and we got 6 full-time employees, soon to be 8, and 8 contractors around Europe in addition to that.
I'm John Stahl. I'm the Director of Web Solutions at One Northwest in Seattle. We are actually a nonprofit that provides plone consulting services to environmental advocacy NGOs. We also do a few other things that don't involve plone. We have about 22 people, of whom 8 are doing plone work, and we've been doing plone since 2005, if I recall.
I'm Calvin Hendricks Parker with 6 Feet Up. We've been doing plone work since 2003. Zope work before that. Started in '99. We do hosting and development. We've got about 13 people in-house working, so I'd say we've been at this for a little while.
Hi, I'm Matt Hamilton from NetSite in the UK. Similar to Calvin, we've been doing plone since about 2003. We were doing Zope stuff before then. We've got a development team in Bristol. There's about 9 of us in the company. And we originally started just sort of building websites originally, using Zope and plone, but then more and more people have been coming to us because of our experience with Zope and plone. So that's sort of what got us into the sort of the consulting role.
My name is Brian Gershon. I'm with Web Collective. I'm an owner there in Seattle, Washington. We're a 9-person company actually right now. We started a year and a half ago, but I personally was involved in Zope and plone around 2002, 2003 as well. We're basically a little different model of ownership. We're 7 owners of the company, so I'd be happy to talk about that some more too. But plone, we do a little bit of Django too, plone, Python, Django.
Okay, thanks everyone. So kind of the framework for the panel today, we're going to talk about sort of getting started. All these guys have been doing plone for a while, but maybe they can think back to the day one of their business and sort of how they bootstrapped it and how they got it started. Then we're going to talk about growing your business. So maybe you have a consultancy, but you're trying to grow it, hire more people, get bigger customers. So talk about that. Then I want to talk about practice and process. So how do you actually, once you have the projects, how do you run them? Things about contracts and that sort of thing. And then if you guys saw the panel yesterday, the 10% plone manifesto, we're going to talk about being a good citizen. So not just using plone, but also giving back to the community. So those are the topics that I have. Do you guys have anything else you want to add to that? No? Okay. All right, so let's get started. How do you guys find projects? Do people find you? Do you have to go out and do RFPs? Sort of like how do you sell Plone to people, basically?
Yeah.
You want to take that?
At the moment, I think it's kind of a mix between us going out and sort of doing traditional sort of sales, cold calls, that sort of stuff, and people coming specifically to us because of our experience. I mean, I'm sure most people will probably agree here. There's a lot of work out there for Plone at the moment, and more people are hearing about Plone and looking for people to help them. And so we get a lot of people that come along. They type Plone into Google, they find us fairly easily. They they give us a call and say, hey, we're looking to do something. Can you help us? Or they've got a very specific problem. They've picked Plone out of the box. They've started using it. They're going along great, and they say, okay, now we need to integrate this with another in-house system we've got, or we want to set up the permissions or groups or whatever like this. So quite often we come in sort of partway through the process and sort of help them get over some of the hurdles.
I think another avenue is also creating advocates in the community. There's certain people who will basically suggest to people that they should use your company because they've either worked with you, so leaving a good impression with current clients, ex-clients, and other like user groups coming to conferences.
We actually use a couple of methods. We don't do any advertising at all. It's all word of mouth, and we do that through some people that are just interested in Plone itself, but a lot of our customers come from people that we've worked with, and a lot of our members are active in the communities, both Plone and other sustainability communities. So we actually do a lot of networking just through our own activities.
We are basically working along two tiers. One is our international market, in which we basically put all the effort into being visible in the Plone community and doing good stuff for Plone, and that's usually enough in itself. But in the local market in Norway and Northern Europe, we usually send offers to public tenders, like government contracts. I don't know how that works in the US, but in Europe it's usually a pretty formalized procedure where everything is announced through some public channel, and companies submit tenders. And we find it surprisingly easy to win those compared to the size of company we run, with like all the leverage extra thing we get from Plone and the community backing us.
That's an interesting comment you make, because we found almost the opposite, that it's very difficult to actually get Plone and open source in general in through, say, like a public sector tender, just because they generally ask the wrong questions, so we have to give the wrong answers, if you see what I mean. And the way that the questions are asked, they just generally stack up against us rather than a level playing field. So it'd be interesting to hear more about that.
Absolutely. We've seen places where we've explicitly been told that we were chosen because we were open source.
I would say in those cases where you've got questions stacked up against you, is answer them the way that you feel is right for you and not to suit the question necessarily. And you may actually get more credibility out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the specific example that we often find is that they'll have some sort of like a pricing matrix. Now, they want to compare apples with apples, so they'll give a standard pricing matrix, and you've got to fill in the boxes. And they won't accept anything else other than you filling in the boxes. And so there'll be a box that says, say, licensing fees. So you put down 0. There'll be a box that says customization. So you put in whatever it might be. Say, in this case, say if it's going out for a public, European tender, it might be something like, 100,000, euros. Well, when they look at that, they go, well, there's a lot of customization there that needs to be done relative to the size of the project. Whereas a commercial project might have, say, 70,000 euros down in licensing fees, or 30,000 euros down in customization. It's the same end cost, but proportionately, they think, well, hey, if you need to do all that customization, then maybe your project isn't suitable for what we need. Whereas the commercial companies maybe hide a lot of that in the licensing fees.
I just wanted to add to that for you people getting started that may not have strong Plone communities, or you may, is to actually start users groups. That's a great way to connect with other partners, and that's I was going to add that, is that a lot of projects do come in through partners. We do have a lot of partners in Seattle doing plone and other things so a lot of projects come in and we trade a lot of work in our local community that way as well.
Yeah, there's a slide coming up on how do you find people, but I'll just add to that and say user groups are also a really great way of recruiting employees. The last 2 hires that Jazz Carta did were through the user group. Sally and Aaron, I've known them for years, and they've been coming diligently into the user group, so I knew them personally, had a rapport with them. I knew that I would get along with them well. So that's another really great way to get out there, is to start a user group if there's not already one in your community, and invite people. And you'll be surprised how many other people in your community, in your local area, are interested in plone, or maybe they're not, but they want to know more. And a user group is a venue, it's a forum where you can share experience and share tips and bring people in from outside to give talks, and you can even get free books from O'Reilly if you register with them. So there's a lot of perks to starting a user group.
A lot of what's been said has, I think, been really interesting. One thing that I'd add to that is that try to figure out who your client community is or could be. Because for us, we're a nonprofit. It was handed to us. We serve environmental nonprofits, so it's a very narrowly defined community. There are, of course, thousands of them, so it's not a small community. But what we found is that we have a very high profile in the community that we serve, and that people come to us. They know who we are, and that makes it fairly easy to know where to go find stuff. And also means that we wound up getting a lot of things that don't quite fit, and we're always sort of figuring out, well, who can we refer that thing that's out of mission to us for, and so there's kind of so focusing. And Brian also has the Web Collective folks. You know who you're talking to. You're interested in a certain community of people who are defined by that broad sustainability mission, and that's turned out to be really, really powerful, because there actually is a lot of people out there who they don't really care whether you're using plone or not. They care if you have a good solution to their problems, which conveniently we often do. But they really want to have a relationship with someone who feels like a peer to them and is trusted, and they feel like is going to be there for a long time. So that's been very powerful for us.
I think the one aspect we kind of missed here was, I think what we've talked about is we're already an established plone company and how we're going out about getting work, but how did we actually start at the very beginning? Mm-hmm. I know for us, it was basically either a friend or someone met through a network, outside of like a technology group. It was like going to, when we were in California, we were involved with a group called Silicon French, and so we actually were going to those meetings and meeting people there who were doing business. And when they find out what you do, they're very interested. I mean, people want your services typically. And that's how we actually got some of our very first contracts, was through these networking opportunities.
Yeah, we also in Boston have something called the 501 Tech Club, and they're all over the country. And so if you're in nonprofits or you're interested in working with nonprofits, you can go to those meetings and you find other people that are either consultants or they're like accidental technologists. They sort of fell into this job at their nonprofit of handling the technology stuff. And those people are hungry for information. They would love to hear about plone. So when I first moved to Boston, I started going to those meetings and networking and meeting people, and made a lot of good connections in the local nonprofit community in Boston. So that's another thing. Is just get out there, meet people. You never know where your next project may come from. I want to move to the next question. How do you determine how much to charge? Do you guys have an hourly rate, a per project rate? Do you set up a retainer, or how do you structure your pricing for your projects?
To not lose money.
It's always good.
I think we initially did like fixed bid projects, and that was kind of unreasonable because things changed so much throughout the process. So we've moved to pretty much a strictly hourly rate, and it's worked much better because clients feel we feel better about clients changing things along the way.
Yeah, we had a similar thing. We started off, fixed price contracts. And it was probably easier then because we were working on smaller contracts. When we started off, there was just a couple of us. We were working on smaller projects. As the company grew, the size of the projects grew. Obviously, the potential for changes within the projects grew as well. If you're working on a project that's going to take you 1 week, there's less chance of things changing. If you're working on a project that's going to take you a year, obviously there's going to be a lot of changes. normally at the political level within the organization. We find, you know, you get working on something and then some boss high up gets changed around and then suddenly everything changes. You know, yes, we now work on a daily rate. We normally will give them an estimate, sort of, you know, based upon that. So we'll work it out ourselves. So we'll say, okay, you know, we've estimated that this will take X number of days, and we give them a price based upon that. But we say that the price we've given them is based upon that number of days.
Garrett, do you want to talk about optional scope contracts? Because I know that's really popular.
We've the fixed price projects are a death trap once your projects go over a certain size. It's like they can change, and just like the complexity of a project that runs over a month with 5 developers or 4 months is just like incredibly hard to estimate, and if you overrun something by 30%, it's gonna hurt really, really bad. Clients don't really like first time you meet people negotiating for a larger project, they're of course really, really frightened of the idea of paying by the hour of something like that's undefined to them. So like
especially if they have to then get budget approved from some other, you know, from higher up.
Well, it's incredibly fuzzy. I can completely understand that they can't do that risk, and so the challenge is like finding something that is acceptable up front, but that also makes sense as you go through a real project. And one of the ideas we've been trying is like open scope contracts where price per hour is fixed and quality level is fixed, but and timeline is fixed, but then you have like a set of features, and then you have to adapt what goes into the project as you go along. If you change stuff, you got to take something else out.
Yeah, we've been doing something similar.
It does demand a lot more like detailed project management, and it's like it is harder to go through with than we thought. It's a really, really nice idea, but like it is hard to manage because it takes a lot of effort in project management, and that's, I think, is one of the lessons that I see very clearly now compared to before. It's like once you grow over a small handful of people, having project managers on board is absolutely critical to making things work.
We kind of have developed sort of two modes of operation. We found that we get a fair number of projects coming in where we feel like we've done this project before. We know what it is. It might, it's kind of fairly small project. It might be $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. Fairly basic website. With some things that are familiar and feel safe and low risk, and it uses Plone out of the box plus well-known add-on products and maybe some custom design work. And we found that we know how long that takes, and we know what the risks are, and we feel pretty comfortable doing fixed price, fairly tightly written scope for that kind of stuff. And we're where we define what the effort's going to go, and we say if you want us to spend more time on these things, we're happy to do a change order. Those are pretty easy to do. And then there's sort of the larger projects that might be 20, 30, 50. I don't think we've done anything bigger than about $70,000 or so, where we will often. We haven't convinced anybody to do pay for agile iterations. Small nonprofits or even medium-sized nonprofits, that's too big of a conceptual leap for them. But what we have had a lot of success with is we have clients. Those larger clients actually come to us often with a very fuzzy idea of what it is they want. They've maybe heard some buzzwords at a 501 Tech Club meeting, not probably from Nate, but from other people. And they have a pretty fuzzy idea about what they want. And we've had a lot of success doing a 30 to 50 hour scoping engagement with them, where we will not build anything, but we'll sit down and spend some really quality time talking to them, listening to them, helping them really get their ideas focused. And it gives us a really good opportunity actually to sort of move them into the box, and because they don't really know what Plone can do. They've heard of Plone, or they maybe even haven't heard of Plone. They've heard there are these CMS things out there that are magical. They do everything somehow. And so it's a really great opportunity to get to educate the client, do a little bit of strategy consulting with them, and help them shape their needs to what the tools are actually good at, and also avoid trying to contract for a pony of some kind, that the magical pony that doesn't exist. And then once we get through that, we often find that, gosh, we've defined all of the risk out of the project, and we can go ahead and promise a fixed price scope, and and then run it pretty close. We still fail at it occasionally, but it's been a nice technique to actually, and it results in a sharing of the risk. That's what I really like about it. The client is kissing $3,000 or $5,000 goodbye, and they're paying their money, and they're not really getting any guarantee for that, but they're getting a really good shot at getting smarter. They're getting a really good shot at knowing what it's really going to cost, and for most folks, that's a good bet for them to make, and that's easy to sell.
Yeah, we've done some similar things as well. I mean, we picked up. I mean, there's a book, I can't even remember the author now, called Web Design Workflows at Work, that was, I don't know, it must be about like 10 years old now. And they've got various stages, and they mention the notion of a pre-production phase and a production phase, and they talk about exactly the same thing there. And the way you've got to explain it is that there is risk and there are unknowns, and if they want a fixed price contract, the only way you can come up with a fixed price is you're going to have to put in some contingency yourself, because you don't know how much it's going to be. So you're going to have to say to them, well, look, okay, we can pick a figure out of the air for you, but it's going to be more than what it would be if we sat down and discussed this properly and came up with the answer. And also, as well, I mean, what we do is we explain to them that, okay, if we do this pre-production sort of initial consultancy phase of a few days, the end result of that, they could go and take to somebody else. They're not tied to us at the end of that. They're not even necessarily tied to Plone. I mean, it's a case of we've helped them establish what they actually want to do, because, yeah, as John said, they've got this fuzzy idea, not even related to Plone, but they've got this idea of what they want to do. I mean, we had a client that wants to do various sort of automatic mapping between documents, sort of thematic mapping and everything. And we were like, okay, yeah, this is great. And it's only when we sat down and talked to them, we found out they've got 15 documents. And it's a case of, well, there's great, but,
Wow.
There's a bit overkill for that. So, I mean, no doubt the collections.
I'd be willing to do that for about $5,000. I've got a highlighter.
Yeah. So I was going to strap the highlighter to the dog and let him wander over the paper. But I mean, seriously, they will have a lot more documents in the future for this thing. But the problem, we identified was that there's no way to kind of bootstrap this at the moment with such a small number of documents. And really, they've got to look at where the information is coming from before we can really provide a solution for that. It's the same. You've probably had similar things that clients come back and they say, "Oh, we've got this design that we really want to use, or we've seen this website we really like." And you're like, "Okay, that's fine, but that's got an information architecture for a 10,000-page site. You've got 5 pages. What are all the menu items going to link to?" So to sit down there and go through this with them at the start, and like I said, explain to them that, yeah, you're trying to share the risk. You're actually hopefully going to come up with a lower cost end of result than if you just gave them a fixed price and estimated it and put in a whacking great big contingency, because you just don't know. And explain to them that they're not necessarily tied to you. You do this pre-production phase. At the end of it, they've got a document that specifies what it is they're trying to do, how they're going to go about it. And, if they want to, they can go and take that somewhere else. We've never had that happen, because you've built up a relationship with them. And generally, if it works well, they're happy to continue that relationship.
Yeah, another thing we've done is put into that kind of a document or contract a percentage of that amount that they paid for the upfront contract can be applied to doing the full project.
Right.
I mean, like you said, it's all about establishing the relationship, and then you also kind of figure out if you really want to do work with that client also.
Just a very small comment to the establishing the relationship and the initial meeting, and it's like one of the very, very obvious traps of doing consulting the first few years when you're just a few people is that developers tend to think that the important work is doing the code and ignore talking to clients. Talking to clients is extremely, extremely important, as you can easily use half your project time to do that, and they will be much, much happier than if you spent that time doing code. It sounded incredibly weird to me when just doing development. It's like sitting with them talking makes them happy. Doing code means you're away. You're not keeping them safe. You're like something strange somewhere else, and they have no idea what their money goes to. If you're next to them, they actually see you spending their money on giving them helpful advice, holding their hand.
Do you generally charge for that time?
Of course.
That's the thing, is if you don't charge for that, you might get away with it a couple of times, but pretty quickly you'll run into the client who will just eat you alive with that. And it might be a really good client. I mean, one of our clients asks us to do really cool, neat stuff, but just the way that, and they're really awesome organization. They're super high functioning. They do great work. They need a lot of time in meetings. They need that. And the first project we did with them, that we wrote the code on budget, but we didn't realize that they were going to take literally 50% time to have meetings with us, and they needed to do that. And so the next time around, we estimated the code, and then we're like, okay, 60% project management time. And and the difficult thing which we did was we showed that to them. We said, look, second time around, here's what we learned the first time. You need a lot of hand-holding. You want a lot of hand-holding. We're happy to do that for you. We think that's good. But that costs money just the same as writing code costs money, because it's all time. And they sort of swallowed hard and they understood. But that was really empowering, actually. That was very it made us feel better, and it actually made them feel better, because they knew they were eating all this time. They felt guilty about it, but they couldn't stop themselves.
Yeah, that's another point. I mean, if you are, say, a one-person consultant or a small team or whatever, and you're then working for a much larger organization, just be prepared to change down a gear in terms of how fast things operate. You've got to have, just things go slowly in larger organizations.
Things go slowly in small organizations too.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they
But I
can
bet
do.
they
But
go
I mean, sometimes you can go in there and you say, yeah, that's great. That'll only take 5 minutes to do. And then, like as John said, what you don't realize is, okay, that'll take 5 minutes to code, but they've got to have X number of meetings beforehand to get that agreed before it can be done.
Yeah, that's why they don't let me talk about time or money.
Right.
Just one comment about billing customers for talking with them. We oftentimes will set up a support contract after a project, and that support contract has a limited numbers of hours per month that they can use. And what we found with one of our customers is that they never wanted to talk to us because it was eating into those hours that they could get work done on like use developer hours. And that was, of course, hurting our relationship because we weren't communicating with them about their goals and what they want to do. So what we decided to come up with was like a 1-hour meeting, doesn't cost them anything, where we just sit down and talk with them, what do they want to do this month, and that way they know when they call us, we're not going to be billing them for that hour, but it helps us to maintain that relationship and have a good, a good relationship with the customer. So I'm going to...
Sorry, just that's a really good point. It's like,
Yep.
we don't just, we're a hard ass about project management time in scope, but we're not billing every 6 minutes, and they call us up and talk to us. And we also are very intentionally loose about that.
Yeah.
But we will not give them more than about 15 minutes, half an hour, unless it's really...
Yeah, you have to time box it, because if
Yeah.
you don't, it's like handing them a blank check and saying, you can talk to me all day if you want, You have to sort of say, all right, I have an hour of time, or 45 minutes if you want, which we can go over the stuff, but then I've got another meeting or whatever, because otherwise they'll just keep talking to you and milking you for information.
Right.
Yeah.
There's one other thing. I think when setting your rate, don't underestimate the value of your services. I know for a fact, in one instance, we lost a contract because our hourly rate was too low. Yeah. I think we're well established in the community, and people know the quality of work we do. That had zero bearing to that board of people.
Yeah.
They saw our price being too low and said, no, they can't do quality work for that rate.
Yeah, there's a perception among customers that if something is too inexpensive, it must not be good. Even if you're the best consultant in
Right.
the world, if your price is much lower than all the other consultants, then they're like, it's got to be too good to be true, right? These guys can't be any good if their rate is so low.
There's also a dangerous misconception among developers that you should only charge for stuff that is hard for you to do. And that is also dangerous. Like, people will pay because for your time, because you have the skills that make stuff you do easy, because it's hard to them. Like, that value, and don't miss out on that. Like, all the easy stuff is just as mission critical as hard development.
Okay, I want to move on to growing your business. Question, yes.
When you charge hourly, how often do you charge? Or how often do you bill?
We usually do monthly. We'll do a monthly statement, and usually we give customers like a weekly status report with a number of hours for that week and just a kind of a brief synopsis of what was done, and they love that. I mean, when they see that come in and it's kind of in their hands, that they're so happy. I mean, they feel like they got something really out of what they paid.
We also do similar to that. Give reports and then bill monthly. If you're a single consultant, I think most clients are understanding that it would be okay to bill every second week or so.
Question. Another question?
So also, if you have more than one developer working on a project, I guess if you're building like that, I guess if everybody's working, like say you have more than one person, they're all putting in hours at the same time on a project, you just add them all together.
Yep.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, person hours.
Okay, I want to talk about what are the challenges of running a plone consultancy, and how do you market your services? If you start out as a one-man shop, how do you then transition into a larger organization? Like, how do you scale? How do you find, maybe you're a sole developer who's doing project management, marketing, all that, and then how do you sort of ramp up to grow to be, a team of people?
Slowly and carefully.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we've done it. It's been a nice, slow, progressive growth. Our biggest challenge right now is finding more people to help grow. But that was we had different challenges in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that was, pretty much managing the different challenges in the beginning were managing our own time and the client relationship and being small and not having enough staff. But we didn't realize at the time you needed more people. Like, it wasn't obvious to you that hiring more people was going to immediately make me more money. It didn't make sense. I saw it as a cost right away. I was like, I can't hire that person for whatever. But I tell you, doing the first step like that made a huge difference.
So how do you know when it's time to hire someone?
That's hard.
I know it's a hard question.
Well,
That's
for us
why
it
I'm
was
asking.
different because we had the hosting side and the development side, so we immediately needed someone just to come in and step in and be like a sysadmin. That was an easy need to fill, even though it was a kind of a cost center, but it freed up so much other resources to go and do development that it was an immediate win.
Yeah, I mean, we've grown sort of slowly. We've grown sort of on average one person a year. And, we take time to find that person. But we've, and the other thing is there's different companies here. Well, I'd say actually the majority of the companies here now are all pretty much geographically based in one place now. I mean, even Jarn is sort of moving towards less distributed teams. But like, for instance, so we're based, in a city. We want to find people locally to us is the way that we work, and so to try and find people within the area, there's great people here at the conference and stuff like that, but to try and find people local to us. So what we found is we go to the universities. We try and get a good relationship built up with the universities. I mean, I'm, alumnus of University of Bristol, and we go back there. We do talks there. We do talks on things like entrepreneurship. I mean, they've got a professional studies sort of course in which, as part of their duty to producing, this is the computer science department, as part of their duty to producing, graduates, they've got to show them more than just code, in order to get accredited. So they've got to show them real world experience. So universities are quite often happy to get people to come in and talk about what it's like out there in the real world. So we go there and do that. And I mean, two of our latest hires have seen me at a talk there. And then when we've put an advert out for looking for new people, they've come along. And that's worked out really well. And the most recent one we did, we actually took on 3 people in one go, which was a big step for us because we've only ever taken on one at a time. But we sort of thought, well, the sort of cost internally of training one person, it's not that much different to training 3 people. And actually it even worked out better because they bounced off each other. So they were all learning together. We would set them a task, and between the 3 of them, they would go away and work on it. We would come in and sort of say, how's you going on this? Maybe you want to look at it this way, et cetera, et cetera. But they did a lot of it themselves. One's now with us full time. The other 2 have gone back to university for their final year. But hopefully next year they'll come and join us because they know us, we know them. That's that hiring sorted hopefully for next year. We don't have to worry too much about that. Fingers crossed.
We just discovered the same thing about the universities. We went up to a job fair just this last couple weeks and came away with some amazing resumes of the students up there. There's actually some really talented people, and I don't think they are aggressive enough about going out and trying to find a job at this point. But if you go to them, they will hand you your resume and talk to you and be excited about it.
And they like cool places to work.
Yes.
I mean, all of the companies here are great places. They're interesting places. They're different to going and work for some great big company somewhere. Yeah. People like being generally, there's different types of people, of course, but the people we're looking for are people who like to be a larger part of a smaller entity. You know, they want to make sure that what they do really has a difference. And when they come in and start working for you, and they, you know, on their first day, you've got them build some of their time out, you know, on their very first day because they've helped something. They really like that. That's a really big thing for them.
I think there's also a myth that, you know, you can't make any money doing open source. It's something you do on the weekend and for fun, but you mean I can actually get paid for doing this stuff? You know, like when you talk to people, they're just like blown away. Like, I can actually write open source code and get paid. Wow, that's so cool.
That is one downside we've seen when we were up at the university. One of the professors, we were talking to him because we had like a reception the night before, and we said we do open source work. He's like, oh, I would never do that. It's like, there's no money in open source. I was like, I'm standing right here in front of you looking for people to hire. It didn't make sense.
Question, Paul, I think you raised your hand first.
This is a little bit about target audience and a little bit about scale. Deal size is the art of knowing when something's too small or when something's too big. What do you feel is your deal size, your natural deal size? What do you think is your upper limit on deal size, and have your thoughts changed over the years?
Oh yeah. It's definitely changed over the years. I mean, when we started, we were taking like the $10,000, little projects, and there's no way we can make any money doing those anymore. I think we're definitely more comfortable in like the 50 to 100 plus size deals now. That's where it works.
Yeah, there's definitely a minimum project size to some degree to make profitability, but we've also found that sometimes small projects can be very profitable because, like John was saying, we know it really well. I mean, we know exactly there's low risk, so some of those projects can be really profitable, where some of the big ones can get into trouble if the change management project isn't. So we've kind of looked at that too. So I think either size you're doing, you can do it well or get into trouble potentially if it's too small.
We've to figure that part out. We've set like we've set up a package of like a fixed price project for the bottom level ones, which is roughly like $10,000, in which we have a predefined scope, and that seems to work pretty well. And
yeah, we do something similar for, you get people that come along, they say, oh, we want to use just stock plone, but we need it skinned, for
Yeah,
instance, is a classic example. And, I mean, every time they came and asked that, I went to one of my skinning guys and I said, look, how much? He said 4 days, every single time pretty much. And so we're like, okay, we'll just standardize on that, 4 days for that sort of thing.
Yeah, that is an easy thing to standardize on, is the skinning. It's pretty predictable.
And it can be good to lead up.
Though, in the higher, I used to have an ironclad rule that if the deal size was bigger than your yearly company income, then the only thing worse than bidding on it and not getting it was bidding on it and getting it. But I'm not sure if I still feel the same way about that anymore. Do you have any kind of really strong feelings about the high end of the deal size?
well, if you get those deals that are bigger than your annual income, you could well say triple your annual income the next year, and it would still be within the scope, right? We did that now, and it feels a bit like it's going too fast. So I'd say if you go more than more than your annual income, I'd say that would be a good rule of thumb for.
Yeah, I'd say not to be too scared of that. I mean, so far, since we started small, 6 feet up was just my wife and I at the very beginning, we have consistently every year doubled our revenue. And that's worked. I don't know how that's going to continue working, but it seems to keep working like it.
It won't continue indefinitely.
No, I assume it won't indefinitely, but at this point, I'm quite impressed that it continues to work, and it's not to be afraid of going out there and growth, and things just seem to land just right. So I wouldn't be too afraid of it. I'd be a bit intimidated by it, because that was definitely a larger project than we've probably ever done in the past, obviously.
There was a question in the back. Kofi, did you have your hand up?
You mentioned going to universities. Do you ever think about doing internships as a form of strategy for teaching?
This year will be our first year for that.
Just want to repeat the question. The question was going to students, but what about doing internships? Has anyone else done that?
Yeah, well, that's what we did. I mean, when we had, like I said, we had three students that came along and worked with us over the summer learning. Now, 2 of them have gone back to university and one has stayed with us. So we've done that. I mean, we've even looked at, NetSite and John and who else were we looking at? RefLab and Pilot Systems. We were looking at trying to come up with almost like a global internship thing. So a student would come and say spend a couple of months in Bristol, a couple of months in Paris, a couple of months in Tombo, and would move around. It was a great idea in theory. The problem that we just couldn't agree on was each education system is different. So in some cases, they'll have an internship of a couple of months. Sometimes it'll be a year. In some cases, the government pays for them to go to a company. In some cases, you've got to pay the government. You know, it seems to be completely different within different countries. So in the end, the idea didn't particularly take off.
I still think we have a chance to do it, but it's going to take a lot more effort than we initially thought.
Yeah.
I'd like to beta test the program.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I would love to see it happen as well. I just want to do a time check. It's 10:10 right now, and on the schedule we're supposed to do a short break, but if people want to continue, we can just go right up until, say, 10:20, like take another 10 minutes if people want to continue. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just, question here.
I have a question about the skill level of people that you hire them. Like, I can see that you can find a number of people that know Python, but I work at UNC Chapel Hill, and I can guarantee you there's no undergrad student that knows plone. Right? So,
Yeah, we pretty much count on that.
would you also hire people that don't know any Python but have good programming skills and are willing to learn?
Nobody we've hired knew Python at the time. No, and that actually almost helped, you know, in a way in the selection process, because what we did is we gave them a quick test, right? And we said, okay, here's the O'Reilly, you know, Python reference, you know, like phone book sized book. Here's a small exercise, you know, you've got to read in a text file, sort, pull out, you know, a couple of names, et cetera, et cetera. See how you get on. You know, we give them a brief overview of Python. You know, it's kind of high level, and see how people get on. You know, we get people at the end that have, like, you know, written memory allocation routines, and we're like, well, okay, clearly you didn't pick up enough about the Python is fairly high level. You don't need to write a memory allocation routine. You know, you don't need to write a quicksort algorithm. You know, if you looked in the index under sort, you would see, you know, within 6 characters you've sorted your list. So really, we almost use that as an advantage to try and kind of see how quickly people can pick things up. Because that's the most important thing for us, not what they know. Because we get recruitment agents coming to us saying, "Hey, we've got this person here, you know, and they've got this, and this, and this, and they want, you know, a great big sum of money." And you're like, "Well, that's great, but none of that's relevant to us." So we prefer to take people on at the lower end ourselves, train them up internally, and kind of, you know, mold them to our own wicked ways as to how they work.
It's completely opposite to what we do. I think we're probably the odd one out in the setting, but we basically only recruit people that have a long history of contributing to plone, possibly, preferably to the core. So our main recruitment arena is here, and the electronic for like IRC and mailing lists of people doing plone development, plone consulting already.
Yeah, we're only looking for local folks. And I mean, I think it's important to find smart, passionate people. I probably shouldn't say this, but we found that some of the folks who are a little further on in the years aren't as interested in learning and kind of putting in that time. So it's been difficult. We thought we would get experienced people that way, like find somebody who's had experience being in industry and maybe glean some advantage from that, but we hadn't found that to be true.
Danny, question.
One question, I guess this is a little bit topical for our group. We ran into issues where none of us had the skills to do something. All of us came from an engineering background, and then we were told, hey, do some CSS. So trying to revisit our skills in CSS took longer. So it was a big question, how do you bill for something you don't know? Because if we had a CSS expert on set, it might take them 20 minutes. It would take us 4 hours. Do you bill for those 4 hours?
No.
Or the 30 minutes you expect a CSS expert to do?
We try to go based off of what we think the expert would do.
Yeah, we try not to. It's a fine line. I mean, there's a lot of gray area, but like, we try to be honest about what we do know, what we don't know. There are obviously always going to be people who know more than us, and there's, you know, anything we do, there's someone who could do it twice as fast, right? But they charge 3 times as much. So it's kind of a balance. When we really try to be very honest, like, are we spinning our wheels? You know, are we just totally flailing around? We don't bill for that. But a certain amount of that ramp up, you know, if we feel comfortable explaining that to the client, we would probably bill for it.
Right.
I wouldn't, like, I don't want to spend time without billing, but it would be totally unfair to hide this fact. We would basically say, well, we don't know this stuff. We can try to find someone to do it, or we can attempt to do it ourselves, but it is going to be unproportionately expensive if we try to do this.
Right. Well, we'll-
Exactly, and get relationships with other companies that have experience with it. So, like, you know, we're based in the UK, we're a fairly monolingual country. You know, we ended up working on a big multilingual project. Well, you know, we got some guys from Giant to come over because we're like, okay, there's a single lingual plone. These are the, you know, get it from the horse's mouth, get them to come over, work with us. Of course, we didn't bill all of that time and the cost of that directly to the client because we're learning, you know, and that's sort of skills transfer as well.
Right. I mean, we may still report those hours, but we may put a percentage down instead. Like, yeah, like say this person was only billed at 50% during this task because they weren't the expert on this thing, but they had to do it anyway. So that way they see you put the effort forward and gave them a break because, you know, you didn't know something, maybe weren't, you know, 100% the expert on it.
It comes down to, I think it comes down to, is it reasonable to expect us to know this? Or is this something that's like, well, you know, we didn't claim to know this and you're asking for it and, you know, we're willing to learn it, but you may have to pay
Just
more
be
of that.
open
Yeah,
and
to be,
explain.
yeah,
Yeah,
to be open.
transparency is really been important to us.
Yeah.
I think we have time for about one more question, and then we have to wrap it up because the next session is starting.
Not
So.
according to him.
I would like to know something more about the kind of project you are doing. Are these more internet solutions with Python programming, or more web pages with skinning?
We get kind of all the above. Things from get paid projects for commerce, a lot of higher ed university wanting to do intranets or these department type sites where I showed off in the lightning talk the microsite, you know, style deployments. So it varies. We even have one project that's Grok backend and a Zool front end. So
Well, if people just want a simple website, Plone is usually not a good solution for it. Like it's way overkill, and we will usually tell them that. But you don't need Plone for doing simple stuff. If it's very very like basic stuff, you should go do Joomla or something cheap.
Okay, I think with that, I want to wrap up and thank all of our panelists here. Let's give them a round of hand. And we're all around all week, and I think most of these guys will be at the sprint as well. So, you know, if you have further questions, just feel free to come up and talk to us. We'd be glad to answer any other questions you have. Thanks, everyone.